I see people are still joining. So while people are still joining, please do say hello. And I see some of you are joining, I think, from all over the world. So definitely, Jenny, you're not the only one up late tonight.
I've just been on a beach doing moonstock, it's called. So, yeah.
Well, I did that last night too, actually.
Did you?
In my moments of Zen, we have an old lighthouse here in Pensacola, and we did a moonlight climb. So we went to the top of the lighthouse to watch the sunset and then watch the strawberry moon rise.
Oh, fantastic. So we're all, that must mean something. Our moons are together. Yeah, it was a full moon here. So, yeah, we really enjoyed it.
Here too.
Yeah, what did you last night? Yeah.
So Jenny, while we're still waiting for a couple of people to log in, and I know I said I would give you a couple of minutes to just kind of give the, what is it? What is this idea of a workplace promise retreat? Some of you have seen that we've been sort of posting and announcing on social media this idea, but I don't know that everybody is really tuned in to what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think I wanted you to be part of this tonight because I think it kind of segues in to what Ted is talking about. And I think you and Ted might even want to have other conversations because I know Ted's really interested in the retreat model as well. So Jenny's information is in the chat, but why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. And hello, everyone. And thank you for having me on Whistleblowers of America Roundtable today. I'm Jenny and I'm from Tara Tours, Ireland. I know only too well that the reality is that toxic work environments, intense professional stress, and burnout do not discriminate. Whether you're a whistleblower or who has stood up for what's right, a healthcare worker, an executive, or any professional assisting in a high conflict way, the toll on your well-being is the same. Chronic stress leaves our nervous systems trapped in fight or flight mode. And I've personal experience of that, as Jackie well knows. So basically, I just want to introduce the Atara Tours. We believe in the power of travel to heal. That is why we have partnered with the Workplace Promise Institute to create the Workplace Promise Retreat, a dedicated space to give yourself a safe place to heal, disconnect, and rebuild. This isn't a standard crowded tour. I have intentionally designed this as a group sanctuary for professionals across all industries who need to hit the reset button. We're taking a select group to the stunning grounding landscapes of the wonderful Ireland. We have mapped out a fully curated, completely effortless experience where everything is handled for you, from 4-star accommodations, private transfers, to an immersive and local experience. But the true magic is the community. You'll be surrounded by a diverse group of peers who will all share one common thread. They understand the heavy weight of professional stress. It's a space to experience genuine peer support, share your stories around an Irish heart, and learn sustainable resilience strategies far away from the noise of the office. We've structured this journey to strike a perfect balance between restorative peace and uplifting connection. We will take breathtaking walks through Ireland's ancient landscapes and historic sites, using nature as a tool to regulate stress and find clarity. But healing also requires joy. We'll embrace the Irish concept of the crack, which is fun music and laughter. We'll enjoy traditional Irish music, many historical sites, and share culinary experiences. It's a powerful reminder to every professional in attendance that there is life, joy, and identity outside of all this and your job description and whistleblowing. If your mind and body are telling you it's time to pause, or if you know a friend, colleague who desperately needs to reinvest in themselves, this retreat is that opportunity. We prioritize creating a safe, intimate environment here at Tower Tours. And I've put in the chat there the registration for our We Travel for towertours.com. And tonight I managed to convince our CEO to give a discount of $150 until the end of July. So if you book with us and it's a small, low deposit of $250, you will get $150 discount. So as I said, my name is Jenny. I'm from Tower Tours. I'm also a whistleblower, so I totally understand the stress. And I think Jackie supported me greatly through my situation, and I'm now in tourism. I wonder, does that tell you something? So let's reclaim our peace and make a promise to ourselves to heal, to recover, and to thrive together. So I just want to say thank you for listening. And it's 12 a.m. here in Ireland. So woohoo!
You did a great job.
I'll take a bell.
Yes. And I mean, we're just kind of, as an organization, we're kind of exploring this concept because I feel like the need is there for us to find other ways to connect and spend time together and do things that are helpful and useful and give us other opportunities to learn, share, and connect. And I think that's a sort of a really good segue into introducing you to Ted tonight as well, because like Jenny and me and most of you on this call, we've all been through the difficult times in life. And now we're trying to reinvent and figure out a way to restore our well-being. A retreat is one option, but obviously there are things we need to do every single day to make that restoration feel real. So Ted is been in this space a while as well. Long journey, another social worker, a Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel retiree, who I'm so proud of to have as a friend. I'm going to let him tell you more about himself. Usually we do this as like a panel series, but tonight I'm just going to turn Ted loose and let him take you on this wellness and resilience journey. So Ted, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. It's good to be with you all tonight. I just wanted to mention before we get started that Paul had sent out the document that I had prepared for tonight via email. So you should have access to that, and also in a link that he put in the chat. So if you wanted to access that document while we go through this tonight, that would be fine. It would help minimize any notes you might want to take, because everything I'm covering is pretty much is summarized in this document. And also, I just want to let you know that my contact information is on there as well. So if there's any questions or any further discussion or more information any of you would like to have, please feel free to reach out to me, especially given the topic that we're going to cover tonight, because it's an area that, frankly, it's just underrated. It's never really discussed. You hear a lot about whistleblower stories, but you never really hear about in the aftermath and the trauma that takes place, what can be done to really navigate through that in a way that you can adequately maintain your own self-care. And that's what our focus is tonight. As Jackie said, I'm retired Marine and combat veteran, a clinical social worker. When I retired from the military, I ended up working for the VA doing individual and group therapy with combat veterans for about 9 years until I became a whistleblower in 2018. And just to give you a little background about what that was about, so you can understand with context here what I'm going to cover tonight, and sharing my own healing journey will just give you a better idea. Having that information to make sense of what I'm going to say and how that relates to my own healing journey, which I think many of you as whistleblowers can also relate to. So what had happened after 9 years in the vet center in 2018, they changed their performance metrics for counselors that basically was burning them out and compromising quality care for veterans. And it had quite reaching effects across the system. And everyone had complained about it. No one did anything about it. And I finally tried to address it with central office in Washington, and it fell on deaf ears. So I ended up, filing complaints with the OSC and the OIG, about what was going on and how this was damaging quality care for veterans and hurting counselors and the burnouts that were going on. Were just incredible. Counselors, seeking their own counseling and therapy, going on medication just because of the anxiety levels, with threats of being fired if you didn't meet the metrics. And then, all the while you're more concerned about numbers and not doing what's necessarily best for the veteran. And that's something I couldn't allow myself to do. So I raised it up the flagpole. And in the end, I ended up actually writing a book about the whole experience. And basically, what had happened is when I filed these complaints, I ended up getting a national audience. I had interviews on NBC, NPR, what was the Military Times. I actually did an article. I did numerous podcasts. And so as that was starting to evolve, the stakes got higher, and they tried to silence me. And basically their ploy was to try to paint me as a mentally unstable combat veteran, to discredit me, to silence me. And as this continued to unfold, my congressional delegates in Rhode Island, who supported me, throughout the whole process, with documentation I had given them to substantiate my claims, eventually led to a GAO federal investigation that validated my allegations. And this led to legislation that was passed in the U.S. Congress to handle these problems that I had addressed. And to the point where there was even other things, even beyond that, they decided to add to the bill the Vet Center Improvement Act, which was part of the NDAA 2021 NDAA National Defense Authorization Act, improvement of vet centers for the Department of Veterans Affairs. So as wonderful as all that sounds, it's like, wow, hey, that's great. You did great. But the price that was paid along the way, as many of you are very familiar with, in your own battles that you've had in your own campaigns, it took a heavy toll. It was devastating. And a lot of things happened with as you well know, how it affected family, not being emotionally, available to them, being mobbed, where they turned your colleagues against you. That happened to me as well, along the way. And this whole thing eventually led to me having a pulmonary embolism 4 months into this. As all of this was unfolding, I shouldn't even be here. I literally almost died. And that was 4 months after I had actually started this whole crusade. And the thing that, I don't need to go into the retaliation tactics that are used. They're numerous. I experienced all that with the silencing, the minimizing, the gaslighting, the counter accusations, and the whole thing. You all are familiar with that, and the impact it has emotionally. The depression, suicide ideation, many of those types of things, just the humiliation, and so on and so on. I don't need to berate that. You're all very familiar with that. But what happened for me is when I had that embolism and ended up in the ICU for 4 days, when I got out a month later, I had a defining moment. I was broken. I was devastated. And what I ended up having happen, which was my defining moment in seeking help and knowing I really needed to do something, is because not only that was I having suicidal ideation, but I was having homicidal ideation. And being a combat veteran, a retired Marine, that's not a great combination. That's not going to end well. And what had happened, and I'm just going to share this one event, is that a month after I got out of the ICU, I was sitting at home. My wife had just retired a day before I left the vet center with the Department of Veterans Affairs, so I could take on this cause without having to be in the system and even facing more ridicule along the way. I felt I could fight the fight of better outside the system. So I took early retirement 3 years before I had planned. And so our children have us come to the living room and to show us, hey, here's these gifts, we got you for, your retirement. And, my wife gets this nice electronic shuffling mahjong table. And I walk in the living room, and my daughter's now husband, who's a Providence cop and a national arms dealer, as I'm walking into the living room, oh, look what we got for you, Dad. And I just about fell over thinking to myself, you have got to be kidding me. I didn't say anything out loud, but I'm thinking to myself, what's wrong with you people? An M4 semi-automatic assault rifle with 250 rounds, as I'm still in the middle of my homicidal ideation. And I froze. I was scared to death. In that moment was my defining moment. And that was a choice point, because I was on the fence and I knew I had to do something, because up to this point, I really hadn't done the things I needed to do to take care of myself, because I was so consumed, with the crusade and the campaign of righting these wrongs, that I totally neglected myself. So one thing I will say about this for me also, I'm a combat veteran, and this was more traumatic than any combat experience I had, because of the level of betrayal and moral injury. And I know most of you are familiar with that, and that's saying something for those of you that aren't veterans. So, it takes a lot of courage to do what we do in our fights to speak truth to power and to rectify, waste, fraud, and abuse. So I ended up doing a number of things, and this is what I wanted to share tonight, because this is what this is really all about, is developing and maintaining emotional well-being and resilience, not just in the aftermath of the whistleblowing, but while you're going through it, while you're in the middle of it. That's the most important thing, and that's what we're going to focus on tonight. But another element that's also important for psychological safety and welfare is, the building a trusted support network, family, friends, therapists, counselors, colleagues that that can be of help, and most importantly, a support group like Whistleblowers of America, who has evolved tremendously over the last several years in terms of what they're able to offer beyond their peer-to-peer program, and now have a template of, as you get into your whistleblowing campaign, all the steps that you need to follow in order to have the most favorable outcome possible, so you don't misstep along the way, which most of us do, and the strategies that you need to employ, the things you need to do, and in particular, legal counsel, which is vitally important, that occurs so that you don't have things backlashing down the road because you didn't do a certain thing a certain way and follow a certain procedure. Very important to get counsel before you launch whatever it is you're going to do. And that was one of my biggest downfalls, because I did not do that. But getting into this mental health empowerment was another one of my biggest downfalls, because that is not something that I did along the way as much as I should have, and certainly not consistently. So what I want to do tonight is share with you some of the things that I did between 2018 and the present time, over that period of time, the last 7 or 8 years, that I found very helpful. It's all evidence-based. Most of it's evidence-based. And it's beyond talking therapies, which typically really do nothing more than compound the trauma, because all that usually happens is people keep ruminating about, events around traumatic, events that occurred during their experiences whistleblowing, and it's not really being processed, and it's not really coming to terms. And there's some things I'll explain to you about that as we go along. So the first thing that happened for me is I was part of an energy psychology group called the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology. And I met a gentleman there who was a shaman, who did emotional freedom techniques, which is a form of tapping. I'll explain about that later. I did dream work with him, as well as family constellations. For those of you not familiar with that, it's just a way of bringing to life certain objects that represent certain emotions and people in your life, and you work through this constellation or work through the elements of it to come to some sort of a healing resolution kind of thing. So these 4 approaches he used, but what had happened for me, and I was desperate at this point because of that defining moment I told you about. Either this was going to work and get me back on track, or things weren't going to end well. And what ended up happening, I ended up living in the woods near his cabin in Pennsylvania for about a week. And the 4 days in the middle, I had to fast, drink water only, and attend to a fire ceremoniously in a shamanic tradition as I went through these different stages of interventions. And he would come out all times of day and night and do these different things. And because of sleep deprivation on top of it, it was able to break through my defense mechanisms in such a way I literally did years and months worth of work in a week. And it was incredible. And what had come, I came away with this was a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that I was supported by all relations, higher power, the nature, the animal people, the plant people, just the whole thing. It really came alive and just gave me a greater sense of gratitude, for life and starting to get reconnected. And along the way, the biggest issue for me was not being consistent with these different practices, this or other things I'm going to share with you, and really having a daily practice to stay grounded and centered. And all these things helped me along the way. And it's not linear. I kind of went back and forth with some of these things, but it did help get me through. And following that, I ended up, one thing I want to mention too, along with what I'm sharing, and it's essential. This is very important, is having a healthy diet and good sleep hygiene and exercise. That's basic, and it's really important to kind of force yourself to do as little, even as little as you can with that is probably the number one priority. And then, of course, following other protocols that I'm sharing with you now as well. But that really has to happen up front, because I found that very beneficial. And then I did meditation retreats with Eckhart Tolle. I was in a 6-month program, the School of a Spiritual Awakening. You learn different, meditation protocols and things like that to help center and ground you, and to be able to neutralize your limbic system, so you're not activated all the time, and your executive function being and your prefrontal lobes being hijacked, which is very important, so that you have access to creativity, to calmness, to intuition, and to that deeper sense of creativity and resolve. And I found that very helpful as well. Another thing I did around 2022 is, I don't know if any of you heard of this, but A Course in Miracles. Absolutely incredible. A professor in Columbia in the late 70s, mid 70s, I think, had downloaded, basically channeling this incredible spiritual work that ended up with 365 lessons for each day of the year, along with 32 chapters. And the whole crux of it really came down to forgiveness, and how you get to forgiveness, not just of yourself, but of others, your life circumstances, because that really, in my journey, I have found as being key to opening me up to even being able to forgive my perpetrators along the way. Although it took years, to get there. I mean, that really was a great foundational work to do that, and working those lessons every day of the year for 365 days. I did that entirely from January through December in 2022, and found it very, very beneficial and very enlightening, and really set the stage for me to continue to move on to other things that I found very useful. Another thing, I don't know if any of you have heard of Qigong. There's many different forms of Qigong, and for me, I found a form of Qigong called Wisdom Healing Qigong with Master Ming Tong Gu, who's centered in Santa Fe. And this is a series of movements and breathing and sound healing protocols that are absolutely incredible, that shift the energy in your system in such a way, wherever there's blockages on a physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional level, really clears those things over time. It really takes a dedicated practice. It's kind of almost a daily thing to really benefit. In fact, I met people that not only had dealt with PTSD, depression, anxiety, but people that were actually cured of stage 4 cancer by diligently working the Wisdom Healing Qigong program. So one thing also I want to mention in the document, all these things that I'm mentioning, I have websites to all of these places, so that if you want to check those out, along with contact information of these places and some of the people, if it's something you feel that resonates with you, that you would like to pursue for yourself, by all means, that's why I put it together. And again, we should have some time for Q&A here at the end. And certainly you can contact me, as I said before, with my contact information in this document. So if you have any questions or need further information, I'd be more than happy to entertain any of you that would like to do so. So another thing that happened for me, and the Qigong thing was kind of like in October 2024, and again, helped to keep me on track and to be stable and healthy for the most part. And again, there were times, honestly, where I took 2 steps backward to take a step forward, and in part because I wasn't doing it consistently as I should with a lot of these things, because I just got sidetracked, and otherwise things probably could have resolved for me emotionally sooner than what it did. But these are things that were all very useful. What I did in a few months after the Wisdom Healing Qigong is I went to Costa Rica for a week, and I did an ayahuasca medicine ceremony, which was absolutely profound. For those of you not familiar with that, that is a plant-based hallucinogen that is facilitated and administered by trained shaman in healing practices using these things, and they have medical staff. It was a place called Rhythmia, and I have that website there as well for anybody interested to check that out. And I have never in my entire life ever felt so loved and safe. It was incredible. These shaman were like angels, and basically the downloads and visions I had were absolutely profound. And not surprising for those of you in the field, I was expecting things to come up in and around the whistleblowing trauma, my combat experience. And what was interesting, it all went back to my deepest wound stuff, which all of it really goes back to in some form for us that experience trauma. And it was early childhood stuff that had come up with physical and emotional abuse I experienced, and it was incredible. And the things that came to me out of that, the 2 basic downloads. It's an interesting story. I'd be willing to share with any of you. If you want to find out more, I'd be more than happy to share that. But for the sake of brevity tonight, I have to keep that general. But basically, my takeaway from that was is number one, it doesn't matter what my role is in life, what I do in life. It's the quality of consciousness that I bring into everything I do, think, and say, and embodying and manifesting, this loving kindness, this unconditional love like I experienced down there is all that's required in everything I do, regardless of circumstance. And that in this state of being an unconditional love, there's really no such thing or need for forgiveness, because in that state, everything has already been forgiven. It was absolutely incredible. And I came away from that with a whole new, about a year and a half ago, a whole new renewed sense of bringing things full circle, and all of these things that I've been sharing with you and other things, which a couple I'll get into here in a moment. I developed a daily program, including the healthy diet, the exercise, the sleep hygiene that I mentioned, the 3 important things that you got to do up front. And I did this for like 10 weeks straight. This was just me, 6 a.m. till 10 p.m, only took a break for meals every day, doing like 10 or 12 different activities during the day in and around what I'm sharing and other things I'm going to share that absolutely put me on a path where I finally had a breakthrough, where I actually felt I was actually reconnecting with life again and starting to get re-engaged. And so here I am, in 2025. The whistleblowing started in 2018, and here it was several years later, that I finally had that breakthrough, which again could have come sooner had I been more consistent with some of these things along the way. I probably would have had that breakthrough a lot sooner, but better late than never. Another thing that's very profound, and I experienced it in Costa Rica, is breath work. And again, here about a month ago at the Energy Psychology Conference, absolutely profound breath work. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, Jessica Dibb is an international certified breath practitioner, and I have never experienced anything so impactful energetically and really moving things through the system. Because when it comes to trauma, it's all about dealing with it at the somatic level, because trauma is stored in the body. And if those of you that may not have heard of Bessel van der Kolk, he's the grandfather of trauma research, and he wrote a book, The Body Keeps the Score. And when you deal with your trauma somatically, and there's more I'm going to explain with that here in a minute, you are actually going to you're going to eliminate, you're going to release the impact, the negative impact of the trauma, whereby you'll still have the memory of what goes on, but it won't be impacting you anymore because of how your limbic system has been in effect neutralized and changed. And there's some things I'm going to explain about that in a minute that's important to understand for those of you that aren't familiar with that kind of a modality. But the breath work is incredible. In fact, I have Jessica's contact information. She wrote a book, Breath Work and Psychotherapy, Clinical Applications for Healing and Transformation. And it has the different breath exercises that you can do, for yourselves. And I would highly recommend that, because it's dealing with things at the somatic level. It is evidence-based. That's one of the major things I would recommend up front, because it's easy to do, it's easy to learn, there's no side effects. You're dealing with things and processing the impact of trauma where you need to. And that's really a good place to start. Not that, other things that I shared you may resonate with, and by all means pursue that as well if you feel called to do that. And the last thing that I wanted to get into and spend more time on here is this whole idea of energy psychology. This is where, from what I have experienced and what I have done for myself, this is the best thing to do, in my opinion, the best place to start. And you can, pursue these other things, because energy psychology deals with such things as thought field therapy, emotional freedom techniques, and trauma tapping technique. And what this stuff is and what it does is it's basically you're activating acupoints on your body that are associated with certain emotions and where they're stored in the body. And as you tap on those things, as you're bringing into mind and holding a certain traumatic event, in your awareness, and, consciously releasing certain things as you're tapping on those points, what it's actually doing. And this is all evidence-based. And there's been pictures documenting this, infrared photography as well as MRIs that show the brain being activated in different ways. And one of the biggest things that's happening when you do this is when you're holding an event that's disturbing in mind, as you're tapping these points, what's happening is you're sending neutral, calming messages through the lymph nodes and the nervous system in your body. And it's registering with your hippocampus and your amygdala, which is a survival part of the brain, which is what typically gets activated when we get traumatized, because those traumatic events are stored in the hippocampus, and the amygdala is the alert system saying, oh, there's danger here, there's danger here. When a disturbing memory comes back from the hippocampus, then your limbic system, your survival mechanism now overrides the executive function, and it completely shuts you down. You can't really be rational. You can't be creative. You can't, access your intuition. you can't really access the right hemisphere of the brain, when it comes to stuff, with language and music and those kinds of, intuitive and good feeling types of things where dopamine is released. And so when you're tapping, these calming messages now in association with a disturbing event is now overriding the limbic system and that traumatic memory. And so it's now is associated with a more relaxed state, thereby reducing the negative impact of the traumatic memory. And therefore, it can, basically it reduces, being triggered as you get into this kind of more and more. And what's really interesting about this, you get quicker results in shorter amount of sessions and with longer lasting results compared to other conventional therapies like prolonged exposure or cognitive processing therapy, typically, which has been promoted by the VA. These are more effective. And in my book, I called out the VA. Besides, the issues I raised, I called them out and how dare they not have this available for veterans at the VA, because it is the most effective thing, that can be done. As I also got into, the specific whistleblowing toxic tactics that are used and what was used against me and the impact it had on me, as I reluctantly did anyway, because I didn't want to, this Marine is showing his weakness because of how he was so devastated emotionally. But I felt I got to get over it because it's important for everyone to know how these things do affect people, because the general public doesn't know. And in the end of the book, I have a blueprint on how to take on these kinds of whistleblowing campaigns with the maximum effect possible so you can have the most favorable outcome. And I outline a number of different things as well. So, it can be an inspiration to whistleblowers. And part of that is this whole self-care piece as well. But with the tapping, what's really cool is there's over 200 gold standard research studies that have been done, randomized controlled studies that show it being more effective than conventional therapies. And what's really cool about this organization is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology is they have conferences every year. They have trainings that can be done online. You don't have to be a therapist to learn how to these things to work with clients. You can learn these things so you can learn to work on yourself, because you can use these things for yourself. And so I do that for myself. I use tapping for myself because sometimes there might be a time where I even still can get triggered, but at least I can build on the success on what I've done before, because I have a viable tool to use that's going to keep me regulated. And I wish I would have been more consistent with that as I was going through my whistleblowing experience, because I would have been more regulated and better off for it in my own self-care had I done that. I do want to share a couple things on the Associate of Comprehensive Energy Psychology. I do have their website listed there, and I have more detail on page 3 of the document about the organization, what they're about, what they do, the different energy modalities. But what's really cool is they have, and I have instructions on how to find it on their website. They have this thing called Resources for Resilience. There's a series of 5 different categories: depression, anxiety, anger, and for each of those categories, they have 3 videos of tapping and a PDF file associated with each one if you want to download at a later time, where you can go through, and a great place to start and have a tool you can start using and research and see what might be more suitable for you if you're so interested. And they also have a Find a Practitioner tab in their menu bar, where you can find a practitioner that's trained for things that might be really difficult if you want to really dive deeper. And you can find a practitioner closer to you if you're so interested. The other thing is they have certification programs too. For those of you who might be counselors that might be interested in that kind of thing. And on that note, there are two people that I have rogered up and have agreed to, for anybody that's interested, and I have their contact information on page 2 of the document under the energy psychology piece. Dr. Lori Layden, who is an evidence-based trauma healing expert and trainer. I just finished a 6-month program with her that encapsulated embodying grace, is what she called it, but it really tied all of these different things together that I've been sharing, in that, we started out, setting our intent. What do we want the freedom from, to have the freedom to, and using breathing and tapping with this, and basically in a way where we're releasing judgments about ourselves, others, and our life circumstances, and to the point where this kind of opens you up in a way and shifts the energy in such a way that you start feeling a sense of compassion, gratitude, love, even joy, and just the wonder of life. And as this is happening, as you surrender to what is and accept what's happening and releasing these judgments, it's absolutely profound. And as this compassion starts to seep in, now comes the ability to forgive. And these last 6 months was definitely the pinnacle for me. I have never felt as connected, engaged, or the sense of gratitude that I've ever had. And it was absolutely a profound experience. It's given me even more incentive here, 8 years later, having done all these other things, and it uses some of these other things as well. But her email is in there. She wrote a book called Embodying Grace that talks about all these things and kind of walks you through it. And Dr. Kristen Holthius, her email's in there as well. She's an evidence-based trauma healer and expert and trainer who's home-based out of Costa Rica, but both of them see clients internationally. And Lori in particular does not take anybody on anonymously, but both of them have said, if you're interested in maybe pursuing something with them, as long as you let them know that I referred you, then that'll set the stage then to email them and set something up if that's something you feel would interest you. And I would highly encourage that if you're so inclined. And I'm just checking some things here to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. I think that so in conclusion, the biggest takeaways for me in all of this, and I just wanted to share as an example of what I went through as a whistleblower for my own healing. And I'm sure, some of you definitely were able to resonate some similarities with a lot of these things and, what might be helpful. But the biggest takeaways for me, it was, you can't do it alone. You cannot. You've got to build a network of support. As I said before, part of that is your own self-care. And part of that is doing some of the things that I mentioned, and building and that support network for safety and protection, and establish a regular practice of self-care that resonates for you, whatever it is. I would recommend the breath work, which I've highlighted in green, along with the energy psychology section on page 2. Those are the things I would recommend where to start, because they're both evidence-based. They're easy to do, easy to learn, and it's better than conventional approaches. And then anything else you might want to explore beyond that, by all means, do what you want to do. I mean, there's so many things out there. I even do therapeutic massage, once a week, and I do jacuzzis and things like that as well.
No,
So
if I can jump in though, because I think, so it sounds like, I mean, this has been a very extensive journey for you, but what would you recommend for some of the people? Because I know some of the folks online here, they work full time, they're still in the middle of their cases. You said start with the breath work. I think that's a good place for us to maybe foot stomp a little bit. Like, so when you've got all these other commitments and things going on and you're not retired and your case isn't over and you can't, go sit in the woods for a week or take a year or 6 months to really do what you did in that deep dive, what would you say would be the things to do that are like helpful in the here and now?
Helpful in the here and now is simply diaphragmatic breathing, the breath work, because as you explore it and getting Jessica Dibb's book, which I mentioned, you can find some things and some breath practices that are only minutes, a few minutes, 7 minutes a day would be very helpful. It doesn't take a lot of time. And as I also said, the emotional freedom techniques, evidence-based, and explore ACEP's website under the energy psychology section on page 2, and these the resources for resilience in these videos. Those videos are only a few minutes long, and once you get comfortable with that, you can download the PDF and have a written version of that. That's a great place to start. And then if beyond that, because that really helps you regulate things, it all comes down to physical regulation. That's another takeaway. All of this comes down in human form is to physically regulate what's going on in order to have that groundedness and that centeredness so that you're not impacted as much and minimize the impacts of these things. That's what I would recommend, those two things. And then beyond that, with the energy psychology, you can explore, find a practitioner if you want to dive deeper with someone on something a little more complex that's out there, along with Dr. Lori Lade and Kristen Holtz has said, you want to check them out, you can do that as well. But consistently doing the practice is key. As I said, focusing on the physical regulation is the most important. And so the last thing I want to say here, before wrapping up, and I have a question for all of you too, after any questions you
and we can take some Q&A. I don't want to not take Q&A.
Right. So in wrapping up, the benefits of the spiritual, emotional healing and growth I experienced in my post-traumatic growth, it was so amazing that it outweighed the cost of my trauma. Now, I know that sounds like an incredible thing to say, but I'm better off today than I was before the whistleblowing even started, because of the strength and resilience I've built, the renewed connection and purpose I have that I hadn't had, in years, and realizing along the way that the greatest gift to ourselves and to the world is your own healing first. Because we contribute and we're co-creating into the quantum field, whether we realize it or not. We're contributing to the collective, whether we're coming from a place of love or fear, whatever. And most of the time, we don't even know it. So the most important thing you can do for yourself and anyone else is heal yourself first and be consistent with whatever practices help get you there. And, so for me, I wouldn't change the experience of the retaliation. I wouldn't change it because of how I have benefited from it in these ways. As strange as that may sound, I never thought I'd ever hear myself say that, as crazy as that sounds. So with that being said, you know how to contact me. If there's any questions or comments, by all means. And then I have a question for all of you.
Yeah, let's give it a chance. And I saw Tom put some resources as well for Jessica in the chat. So thank you, Tom. And I saw Richard made some comments in Bali, Jessica, So I see some comments in the chat. Anybody want to contribute any thoughts? One thought I had was I just saw this week Noelle Webb posted a thank you letter to the people who retaliated against her, because it really made her dig deep into herself and come out a better, stronger person. Not the person she thought she was going to be, but like this new version of herself was able to shed this old construct. And sometimes it's coming past this and figuring out how we come past this and integrate it into who we are. And when is that cathartic moment? Like, I know for me, I remember having gone through my hearing and all that, and we got off the hearing, and I remember feeling like, you know what? This is it. I have made my peace with this. I have said what I wanted to say. Whether they listen or not is on them. I have said it. And I knew at that moment I was done with my case. I wasn't done with all you all, but it gave me the brain space to want to then really build Whistleblowers of America. And like you were saying, create that supportive, mutually supportive community of people with that shared lived narrative. And I know I won't call anybody out, but I know that I can see people are on here from all over the world. I mean, Jenny logged in from Ireland, but I know some of you are also in Europe and Canada and other places.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have any other comments before I let Ted have the last word? Richard, I know you've got to have some thoughts on your mind. I've been watching you nod, and right, you're on mute, I think. No, you were off mute, but you're. Nope. I can't.
That should work. That should work.
Yeah, you are. Yeah,
well, there you are. I didn't know how to negotiate the technicalities of being able to speak. I'm just wowed. I just, aside from, well, I hesitate to address you by your first name, but aside from Ted and I sharing some similar background in terms of working at the Veterans Administration vet centers, and mine goes back to 1980. I feel very heartened by what you've shared with us today, Ted. I see you very much as a remarkable role model, and just your presence and your sharing, without any exaggeration or hyperbole, has been profoundly meaningful to me. I'm very, very touched. I actually was feeling kind of triggered today, and I'm listening to what I'm hearing, and it speaks so directly, to what I need to do, beyond what I'm doing, which is, primarily EMDR and some other approaches. But also we share the same profession. And so I'm delighted. Jackie, I can't thank you enough for organizing for me to be present. Really a big thank you and grand merci.
Richard's in Canada. And so when you say Veterans Affairs, you're talking about the Canadian Veterans Affairs.
Actually, no, I was I got permission to join the U.S. Army as a reserve officer, infantry officer training, and but I was doing research at the time. Oh, I just wanted to say one quick thing. When I was giving a speech in 1980 to mental health at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, and I had the staff there, and one of the psychiatrists, we were talking about PTSD. It was actually that year, I think 81, that PTSD became a word, a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And this psychiatrist he said, well, all of it is just, all of this trauma thing, all of it relates back to, to childhood, and nothing to do with the war. So it's funny that Ted, you did make reference. Well, we know that. We did make reference, but trauma does stand on its own. When it's unfortunately experienced, in adulthood.
All right, Ted, over to you for your closing. I know it's getting late, and we usually go over about 5-10 minutes anyway, but I'm going to let you wrap us up unless anybody has anything else.
I said what needs to be said. Again, anybody that would like to contact me offline, by all means, I will entertain anything that you would like to pursue. And I would like to know, maybe a show of hands, if there was the possibility that there could be a retreat for whistleblowers somewhere on the East Coast, let's say maybe in the next year and a half, whereby Lori Layden and Kristen Holthius, who I told you about, who would be willing to see people on a referral basis for me, they have already rogered up. They'd be willing, and they know my story. They've been very supportive of me through this whole process, and I've seen them at work, and they are incredible. I just wondered if someone like them or others who I know in the field, who I have a good rapport with, were able to, we all were able to come together and do a retreat specifically for whistleblowers. Who would be interested in that? Is that something that would interest you all? I'm just curious, because I can't tell how many people responded. You're muted, Jackie.
I'm seeing about 3, 4, 5 hands went up. Yeah, we got a couple of people, definitely.
Okay.
And like I said, not everybody is in this hemisphere either.
Okay, well, that's true too. Right. So, so the last thing is, I'm just curious. So that would be of interest, right? Because there's a lot of people here internationally. So, yeah, well, that's something that I would like to see happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
I see, Richard, is that your hand up? Because you've got 10 fingers up, but not a question.
The last thing is just so you all know that at next year, or not next year, this year, God, we're already in 2026. At this year's whistleblower conference in Arlington, it's going to be this year, the Workplace Promise Institute. I will again be doing this segment there, a little expanded. And I think based on what I saw happen tonight, that would probably give us an hour or more of actually being guided through some experiences of regulation and tools that you can use as takeaways to have a more direct experience. And depending on time, I might even do a demonstration with someone with tapping on a traumatic event, if time would be permitted, and if that's something people would like to see. So I'm open to that as well, in the moment as we convene for the conference. So
yeah, I put it in the chat earlier, but I'll do it again since I think we have, I mean, and like Jenny was talking about, we have one kind of idea for a retreat in Ireland. If you and I can talk some more and organize something that's more energy psychology focused as a retreat, and we can find the location to do it in, I'm game for opening this up. I feel like my job here is to sort of orchestrate a little matchmaking, facilitating, but I'm not the only voice in this community. So
yeah, I have 3 people that I know well. I've seen them at work. They're incredible, and they are all trauma experts, and it's phenomenal what they've done. And I can share more on their bios at another time. But all 3 of them have rogered up because of my connection with them. that they would Roger up to be part of facilitating a retreat. And so that's the hardest part to do.
Yeah, let's do it.
Program together, is not that hard as long as you got the people that are going to be, the primary facilitators. That's the hardest part. The logistics of finding the place and organizing it, that's not that hard to do. It really isn't.
Yeah, I've been, I definitely have some leads and ideas on that too.
Okay.
So let's talk more about doing this. We've got the Ireland one coming up. I don't think she said when. I think we were talking about like the second and third week of October of next year. So not coming up this year. Next year. She's talking about, we're looking at Ireland for 2027.
Well, Ireland 2027. So yeah,
but that doesn't mean that's the only lots of lightning out there right now. We can do we can do more than one thing. We're a talented bunch.
That's right. That's going to be probably mostly people in Europe. Probably.
Well, the idea is to bring Americans to Ireland is kind of the goal.
Oh, I see.
We would love to have you come.
Well, I mean, given the fact that we're talking October 2027, that's a distinct possibility. Being that far out, this year would not be possible. But I think that being said, depending on who's doing what and who's facilitating and who's being compensated for their services and all that's another piece. But these three people I talked about, that's a possibility as well.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Please stay in touch with us and Ted. And like I said, like Ted said, we do plan on having him back at the conference. We thought this would be a good opportunity to give you guys a taste of energy psychology and emotional well-being and resilience. And we'll definitely share more information. We'll make available on our website and in our library the resources. I think we put them in the library already, the resources that Ted shared. But if you don't have them or you missed it, just email and we'll make sure you get all the information that you need. Happy July 4th. Go enjoy Independence Day for those of us celebrating this week. Thank you for everything, and we'll talk to you in a few weeks. I don't think we're going to have one of these in September because of National Whistleblower Day. That week begins on like the 25th, and so we'll be in DC. We've got Giraffe Camp on the 30th. If you've got kids that want to sign up for Giraffe Camp or young adults, we've got a program with George Washington University. They're going to be running a anti-corruption education protocol with some of our folks that week too. So, but we'll be in touch. I'll let you know when the next one of these roundtables is going to happen, and we will talk to y'all soon. So have a good one. Happy Independence Day.